The palace has survived centuries of scandals, but few moments have sparked such a mix of shock and admiration as the one we're about to dive into. Imagine the scene: cameras poised, Oprah Winfrey, the Queen of Tell, all interviews extending her hand once more to Britain's royals. But this time the answer wasn't a polite, "we'll consider." It was a thunderous, unmistakable no. Prince William, often seen as the measured, cautious heir, slammed the door on Oprah's offer with the kind of force that rattled both sides of the Atlantic. And why? According to insiders, William's rejection wasn't about ego or publicity, it was about Meghan. Ever since that infamous Oprah interview where Meghan and Harry launched their grenades of accusations, William has carried the scars: betrayal, deceit, public humiliation. These weren't just abstract wounds. They cut directly into his family and, most painfully, into Catherine's heart. As I picture the tension in those palace corridors, I can almost hear the whispers racing ahead of the headlines. He turned her down. He protected Catherine. For me, the image is vivid. William standing tall, his hand tightening on Catherine's shoulder as if to say, "Not this time, not my wife." Here's a micro-fact for you. Did you know Oprah's 2021 interview with Meghan and Harry pulled in over 49 million viewers worldwide? That's more than the audience for some royal weddings. To step into that spotlight again would have meant risking another global spectacle. So William chose differently. He chose silence over spectacle, loyalty over limelight. And in doing so, he didn't just say no to Oprah. He drew a line in the sand that could redefine the royal family's relationship with the media. But to truly understand why this decision struck like a lightning bolt, we need to step back and look at the battlefield. William walked into the weight of history, the scars of Oprah's first bombshell, and the fragile image of a monarchy struggling to heal. To understand why William's rejection of Oprah's interview hit the world like a thunderclap, we need to rewind. The ghost hanging over this story is Meghan and Harry's explosive 2021 sit-down with Oprah, the interview that tore at the seams of royal image. You remember it: dark lighting, emotional revelations, and bombshell claims of betrayal inside the palace. That interview wasn't just television. It was a cultural earthquake, and its aftershocks still echo through the royal corridors today. Back then, Oprah's name became synonymous with royal scandal. Overnight, Buckingham Palace went from a fortress of tradition to the centerpiece of a global drama. And for William, the fallout wasn't abstract, it was personal. Meghan's words cast shadows on his family, leaving Catherine caught in the crossfire. She wasn't just a princess anymore, she was a target. The thought of stepping into Oprah's spotlight again, under those same conditions, felt like reopening an old wound. I'll admit, when I look back at footage of that infamous interview, I still feel the weight of it. The camera angles, the gasps, the headlines that followed it was a masterclass in media spectacle. And here's a micro-fact. Oprah's Meghan and Harry interview generated over 17 million views on US television alone on its premiere night, a number that rivals some Super Bowl broadcasts. Imagine the pressure of walking back into that arena. Meanwhile, William and Catherine had spent years carefully repairing the monarchy's reputation. Their appearances as a team, whether at charity events, overseas tours, or family milestones, were calculated to project stability, unity, and dignity. Every smile, every handshake, every carefully chosen word was part of a larger mission: to restore the royal family's image after years of turbulence. Accepting Oprah's invitation risked undoing all of it in one fell swoop. And then there's the symbolism. For Charles and Camilla, interviews had long been tools of rehabilitation. But for William, the stakes were different. As the heir to the throne, his actions are not about saving face, they're about preserving the monarchy's very survival. Catherine, beloved by the public and admired internationally, is central to that mission. To risk her reputation on Oprah's stage would be like placing the crown itself on a roulette wheel. Picture the pressure. Late-night strategy sessions with advisors, stacks of newspapers spread across polished oak tables, and William pacing as Catherine sits beside him, calm but firm. The decision wasn't just about media, it was about family, about loyalty, about refusing to repeat history. So when Oprah's team reached out with their tempting offer, the palace already knew what the answer would be. But the refusal wasn't whispered in private. It thundered out, loud enough for the world to hear, and it marked the beginning of a new chapter in William's story. Yet here's where the drama intensifies. Because while William's firm no seemed to slam the door, small signs began to surface that hinted at deeper currents. Whispers in the media, shifts in palace behavior, subtle changes in how Catherine was being presented, signals that something beneath the surface was stirring. Royal scandals don't erupt overnight. They build, quietly, in whispers and subtle shifts. After William's decisive rejection of Oprah's offer, you might have expected the matter to die down. But in the days that followed, sharp-eyed observers began to notice small details that suggested all was not as simple as it seemed. First came the leaks. An anonymous source whispered to a London tabloid that Oprah's invitation hadn't been casual. It was pitched as a chance for William to set the record straight after Meghan's accusations. That alone raised eyebrows. Why would William need to defend himself years after the fact, unless pressure from Meghan's camp was mounting again? The suggestion that Meghan might be planning another round of revelations suddenly transformed William's no from a polite refusal into a declaration of war. Then came the body language moments. At a public engagement, Catherine smiled graciously as she greeted a line of dignitaries. But photographers noted how William hovered closer than usual, his hand never straying far from hers. Commentators seized on the detail, interpreting it as symbolic. William guarding Catherine from further harm. I must confess, when I watched the footage, I too felt that unspoken message. Not again. Not through her. Here's a micro-fact that adds weight to these perceptions. According to communications experts, audiences interpret body language up to 7 times more strongly than spoken words. For William and Catherine, that meant every glance, every touch, every pause carried immense symbolic power. The whispers grew louder when royal aides began canceling certain media-friendly events. Traditionally, Catherine and William never shied away from the press, but suddenly interviews were being scaled back. Statements were issued in writing rather than spoken live. It was as if the couple had built a wall between themselves and the media spotlight. Was this simply caution, or was it a shield against another Oprah-fueled firestorm? And then came the moment that truly set tongues wagging. William, during a Q&A session with students, was asked casually about sharing his story on television like Meghan and Harry. His response was swift, almost too sharp. "We don't need cameras to prove our commitment." The audience laughed politely, but the remark ricocheted across social media within hours. Commentators called it a direct swipe at Meghan. The hashtag number protecting Catherine trended globally. For me, that was the mini climax, the first flash of thunder in a building storm. William, usually careful with words, had dropped his guard long enough to reveal the depth of his feelings. And those feelings weren't just about Meghan. They were about Catherine. Protecting her had become his line in the sand, his reason for rejecting Oprah, his motive for keeping the palace sealed from media predators. But here's where the drama deepens. Behind the palace gates, advisors were growing anxious. Some argued that William's refusal looked noble. Others worried it made him appear evasive. Was silence strength, or was it weakness? The debate began to ripple outward, stirring conflict not just between palace and press, but within the royal family itself. Imagine it. The polished marble halls of Kensington Palace, dimmed at night, as aides huddled over laptops, whispering strategies. Should William maintain his silence, or should he strike back with carefully controlled appearances? And looming over every conversation was Oprah's name, like a shadow that refused to fade. The signs were clear. What had begun as a firm no was quickly snowballing into a larger drama, and with each passing day, the question became louder. Would William's silence protect Catherine, or would it backfire and ignite an even bigger firestorm? If the first signs felt like whispers in the wind, what unfolded behind closed doors was a full-blown storm. William's refusal of Oprah's invitation didn't silence the media, it inflamed it. Tabloids speculated endlessly. Commentators filled hours of airtime, and palace insiders found themselves trapped in late-night meetings trying to manage the fallout. Advisors were divided. One camp urged William to reconsider, arguing that a carefully controlled interview could restore balance and counter Meghan's narrative once and for all. "Silence looks like guilt," one aide reportedly warned. Another camp insisted the opposite, that to appear with Oprah again would be walking into the lion's den. Catherine, ever the steady voice, was firmly in the latter camp. "We've seen what that stage can do," she is said to have reminded her husband, "and we're not playing that game." I must admit, imagining those discussions makes me shiver. Picture the scene. A long oak table in a Kensington Palace drawing room, Papers spread out, advisors leaning forward with furrowed brows, William pacing back and forth while Catherine sits poised, her calm presence anchoring the chaos. The weight of the monarchy itself seemed to hang in that room. Meanwhile, Meghan's shadow loomed large. Reports surfaced that she was considering a follow-up appearance either with Oprah or another high-profile platform. Whispers suggested she had more revelations, more grievances, more fire to throw onto the royal stage. For William, this wasn't just media gossip. It was a ticking time bomb. He knew any fresh claims would reopen wounds and, once again, drag Catherine into the line of fire. Here's a microfact that underscores the danger. Historically, public trust in the monarchy plummets fastest not during political crises, but during personal scandals. The 1992nd, scarred by Diana and Charles's marital breakdown, saw approval ratings sink to some of the lowest in modern history. William knew that even the perception of discord could cripple the crown. Behind the scenes, palace staff began adjusting strategies. Catherine's schedule was subtly shifted to emphasize her role as a unifying figure. Appearances with children, hospital visits, charity events, all designed to contrast her warmth with the coldness of Meghan's accusations. William, meanwhile, scaled back his media access even further. Requests for interviews were declined. Press briefings shortened. The palace was circling the wagons, but tensions inside the family were harder to contain. Charles, juggling his duties as king, reportedly urged William to keep communication open, wary that silence could deepen the rift. Camilla, according to insiders, felt the family should not bow to media traps. Yet others whispered that William's defiance risked isolating him from allies who valued transparency. The mini-climax came during a private dinner at Windsor. According to leaks, William confronted senior advisors who were pressing him to reconsider Oprah's invitation. His response was icy, final. "I will not let my wife be humiliated on that stage." The room fell silent. Even those who disagreed recognized the resolve in his voice. It wasn't just a media strategy, it was personal. I can almost hear the clinking of cutlery abandoned mid-meal, the stunned expressions as William laid down his line in the sand. For Catherine, it was a shield of loyalty. For advisors, it was a signal that no amount of persuasion would shift him. From that moment, the palace knew the path ahead would be rocky. William's defiance had set the course, but Meghan's looming counterattack and Oprah's persistence promised more turbulence. The storm wasn't over, it was only gathering force, and as whispers multiplied in both London and Hollywood, one truth became unavoidable. The inevitable clash was coming. The big blow-up was no longer a question of if, but when. Every storm builds toward its thunderclap, and for this royal drama, the thunder rolled in the moment William's decision went public. Until then, it had been whispers in tabloids, hints in body language, and speculation from insiders. But once the official word leaked, William had flat-out rejected Oprah's invitation. The entire media landscape erupted. The headlines were merciless. William shuts door on Oprah. Future king defends wife against Meghan's media machine. In the United States, talk shows buzzed with theories. In Britain, the press split sharply. Some praised William for drawing a line. Others accused him of cowardice, of avoiding transparency. Suddenly, William wasn't just rejecting an interview, he was making a global statement. What made it explosive wasn't simply the rejection itself, but the reasoning behind it. According to those close to the couple, William had been crystal clear. Meghan's deceit in her first Oprah interview had harmed not just him but Catherine directly. He wasn't about to let history repeat itself. That framing, protecting his wife against Meghan's manipulations, set fire to public debate. Was William the gallant husband shielding Catherine from humiliation? Or was he painting Meghan as the eternal villain to justify his silence? I must confess, as I scrolled through the barrage of reactions online, I felt the tension in my chest. The hashtags told the story in real time. Number Protect Catherine surged across Twitter, while Number Meghan Truth fought to dominate. It was a digital battlefield, each side armed with memes, sound bites, and fury. Here's a micro-fact for perspective. Studies show that within 24 hours of a major royal scandal, online mentions can spike by more than 800%. That means millions of people around the world were talking about William's refusal before he had even uttered a public word about it. The visual that sealed the blow-up came days later, when William and Catherine appeared at a charity gala. Photographers captured him placing a protective hand at the small of Catherine's back as they entered the ballroom. The crowd erupted in cheers. To supporters, it was the image of a man standing by his wife. To critics, it was carefully staged theater. Either way, it became the photograph of the week, William as the defender, Catherine as the queen-in-waiting he refused to see tarnished. Behind the cameras, however, palace staff were scrambling. Oprah's camp was reportedly furious, insisting the invitation had been offered in good faith. Meghan's allies whispered to friendly journalists that William was dodging accountability. The tension escalated into a full-blown media war. For every headline praising his loyalty, another accused him of stonewalling. Charles, caught in the middle, was said to be uneasy. As king, he valued discretion, but he worried his son's hard stance might worsen the divide with Harry and Meghan. Yet William was immovable. "I will not risk Catherine for headlines," he reportedly told advisors again, his voice like ice. And so the blow-up had arrived. A royal heir publicly rejecting the most powerful interviewer in the world, drawing a line not just between himself and Meghan, but between the monarchy and the kind of media spectacle that could destroy it. But if William thought the crisis ended there, he was mistaken, because every explosion leaves shockwaves, and the fallout from this thunderclap was about to shake the palace even harder than the decision itself. The blast of William's rejection didn't fade quietly, it sent ripples crashing through the royal world. The palace, usually so adept at controlling the narrative, suddenly found itself on the defensive. By the morning after the news broke, television anchors, tabloids, and online commentators had already transformed William's refusal into the defining royal story of the year. The media landscape fractured. Supporters painted William as the model of loyalty, a husband putting his wife before the glare of celebrity television. Headlines in the British press praised him for standing tall, with one tabloid declaring, "William protects his queen." Across the Atlantic, however, the tone was harsher. American commentators accused him of ducking transparency, suggesting that avoiding Oprah only fueled suspicions. It was as if the Atlantic itself had become a dividing line in how the story was understood. For the public, the split was equally sharp. Crowds outside royal engagements cheered Catherine's name louder than ever, chanting their admiration for her resilience. Yet on social media, Meghan's supporters rallied, accusing William of silencing voices that dared to challenge the institution. I must confess, as I watched this digital war unfold, I felt the enormity of it. Millions of strangers locked in battle over a family feud, each convinced they were defending truth itself. Here's a micro-fact to highlight the stakes. Surveys show that public approval of the monarchy swings more dramatically during scandals than during official ceremonies. A coronation might lift approval by 5 or 10%, but a scandal can cut it in half almost overnight. For William, this wasn't just about image, it was about safeguarding the monarchy's future. Inside the palace, the atmosphere grew icy. Charles, juggling his role as monarch, was torn. Some insiders claimed he quietly wished William had handled things with more diplomacy, fearing the rift with Harry and Meghan would deepen further. Camilla, meanwhile, was said to bristle at how Catherine's star seemed to rise higher with every headline. The unspoken question hung in the air. Was William's rejection protecting Catherine, or was it setting her up as the monarchy's true power center? Palace advisors scrambled to recalibrate. Catherine's schedule was ramped up: more school visits, more charity appearances, more photo opportunities, showing her as the warm, relatable face of the crown. William, in contrast, grew more guarded, offering only the briefest comments to the press. The message was clear: Catherine would carry the public image, while William would hold the line in silence. I can almost picture the polished marble corridors echoing with hurried footsteps, aides clutching files, tension seeping into every corner. Each decision was now a balancing act, protecting Catherine while containing Meghan's next move. And make no mistake, whispers suggested Meghan was already plotting her response. Because the fallout wasn't just about William's refusal, it was about what came next. Oprah's team was reportedly weighing alternative royal voices. Meghan's allies hinted at new revelations ready to detonate. And the world waited, perched on the edge of its seat, for the next twist in a saga that seemed far from over. The blow-up had shaken the palace. But the cliffhanger? That was just beginning. As the cameras flashed and the palace gates closed each night, one truth remained. William's bold refusal had not ended the drama, it had only shifted its shape. Camilla's silence grew heavier, Charles wrestled with unease, and Catherine shone brighter with every appearance. Yet in California, Meghan's circle whispered of unfinished business, hints that the Duchess still held cards she had yet to play. The monarchy stood on a knife's edge. Would Catherine's rising star stabilize the crown, or would Meghan's looming revelations plunge it back into turmoil? And what of Oprah? Would she simply walk away, or find another royal willing to sit in the hot seat? I must confess, as I imagine the throne room bathed in moonlight, I feel the suspense tightening. Every decision now carries the weight of centuries. Every silence, every word, could spark the next chapter in this royal storm. And here's the cliffhanger. William may have protected Catherine this time, but the game is far from over. The battle for narrative, loyalty, and power is only heating up, and the next move could change the monarchy forever. So stay tuned, dear listener, because if you thought this was the end of the drama, you haven't seen anything yet.